Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I'm Ron Fisher, Director of the Infrastructure Assurance and Analysis Division at Idaho National Lab, and look forward to talking. My topic today is infrastructure resilience, risk, and cybersecurity challenges. Hopefully I can make slides available to you. I've been at INL for 8 years. Prior to that, I was at Argonne National Lab. I've been working in cyber and infrastructure really the last 25 plus years since the President's Commission on Critical Infrastructure Protection, and want to share some lessons learned from that, what I've done. Here's kind of my quick agenda. What I want to cover is give you some history of critical infrastructure, talk about cyber risk, give you an idea of some of the things that we're doing at INL. I like this graphic. If the internet was an amusement ride, we don't get training. We just get devices. It's amazing how quickly little kids just take to operating tablets. And so we'll talk about why that's a problem. I wrote a book chapter a few years ago that kind of was my opportunity to tell my history in this field and how I observe some of the changes that have happened. And we could argue about this, but I basically identify 5 time periods that in the 80s and before that, everything was about physical security. And there was even a congressional hearing in the late 80s because we were starting to see some failures of our critical infrastructure. There was a power outage in Seattle, a long distance outage in the Chicago area. In fact, I was living in Chicago at the time. It was weird because you could make long distance calls, but you couldn't make local calls, and that went on for a while. We started to see terrorism increase, planes hijacking, and so that led to the formation of the President's Commission on Critical Infrastructure Protection, which is, hey, what do we need to do about all of these things that are happening to the nation? And once the commission dove in, they said, those physical threats are obviously important, but the cyber threat is coming. And so that really laid the groundwork about, hey, we need to get ready for the cyber threat. Then obviously that all changed after 9/11, and Homeland Security Act of 2002 formed the Department of Homeland Security. And then after Hurricanes Katrina, Rita, Wilma, we saw that there was this push for all hazards. We weren't prepared for those hurricanes, and a lot of backlash on FEMA, other government support. So that led to an all hazards shift. We do very good about shifting when we need to as a nation, not the best in being proactive. And now we're in this phase that I call, hopefully we're working towards more of a holistic resilience solution where we're incorporating physical, cyber, terrorism, all hazards into this overall model. The top of the graphic, I've got this infrastructure interdependencies, and you can see that it's growing in size, and that represents how over time we become more and more dependent and interdependent on our critical infrastructure. And I'm talking, when I say critical infrastructure, I'm talking about those infrastructures that are our lifeline: energy, which is electricity, oil, natural gas, transportation, water, wastewater, chemicals, all of these infrastructures that we rely on for our security, economic prosperity, and health. Actually, health is one of the critical infrastructures too. I mentioned the holistic framework, the holistic resilience framework. I'm going to talk a lot about the infrastructure component of it, but want to recognize that these are all important: community, organization, social, and personal. And I'll talk briefly about some of these other ones, but a lot of our focus is on our critical infrastructure, as I mentioned. Moving on to cyberspace. It's interesting that if you read the book Wired, it's interesting how the internet kind of came together and how it moved from the monopolies of the phone industries to Silicon Valley, actually, opening it up and it becoming a distributed model, and then with the .com boom, it really created this framework that started able to really connect everyone up in a faster fashion, going from working to megabits and gigabits and beyond. The term was actually coined, cyberspace, in a science fiction novel. So it's a man-made domain. We forget that it was man-made domain that connected all of these devices. And as I mentioned, the history is just fascinating, and it obviously offers a lot of opportunities, but also offers some risk. And that's really what it comes down to, is a risk management problem. In the 1913, here's a kind of a cartoon of, there was the weapon of the day and the investment that you need to make. And now all you need is a device, a phone, a laptop, a computer. You don't even need a computer. It used to be you had to have a computer and you had to have a strong programming background. There's a lot of malicious tools out there. The programmers don't even need, you don't have to be a programmer to operate them. And cyber has become the top threat in the U.S. I like to do this time comparison that in 1996 with the President's Commission, there was no immediate threat was called out, but we should prepare. In the 2000s, we started seeing cyber attacks on infrastructure beyond the U.S. borders, but we didn't see a lot in the U.S., generally speaking. And now we're seeing a rising number of cyber attacks in the U.S. And I like this quote here down below. It's not that we can't connect the dots, it's that we can't even see all the dots. That means that our vulnerabilities are increasing, and we don't always even know what all of our vulnerabilities and threats are. And ransomware, continues to increase. Here's examples of the U.S. attacks that I mentioned. Water treatment, the Colonial Pipeline happened earlier this year. The water treatment plant was in Florida. Meat packing plant. Different infrastructures. Commonality is they were hacked from a cyber threat. Sometimes it's gaming. Sometimes it's about money. Sometimes it's just malicious. The quote on the left, I won't read it, but I'll summarize it. That back in the President's Commission, we needed to take action. It was a call to take action. We don't see a threat today, but it's coming. It's interesting because George Mason University did a study 10 years later in 2007 to say, hey, have we made progress? Have we followed what the commission asked us to do, and have we taken these steps? The bottom line was no. It's hard once the train has left the station, so to speak, with cyber. It's hard to fully embed cybersecurity after the fact. And here's kind of why this happened. This graphic I built from an article back in 2013, and it was hard to imagine, but back in 2013, we were just over 10 billion devices, and Cisco predicted that we'd be close to 50 billion in 2020, and they were pretty close to that forecast. And now there's different projections out there, but it seems like they gravitate towards about 125 billion devices by 2030. That's a huge increase. Basically, a lot more things. We call it the Internet of Things. More things are being connected to the internet. This is our critical infrastructure. These are our personal devices, work. All facets of our life are impacted by this. And just if you think about it, just think about some of the devices you've added. We all pretty much have cell phones, but now it's interesting how new devices come up. Smart thermostats have been around for a while, but you can actually get a Bluetooth-enabled water bottle, fork, help monitor your eating patterns. There's a Bluetooth toilet, so you can heat your seat before you use it, flush. I mean, there's a lot of convenience things that now are being added, and as many as 50 connected devices per household, are in place because of these kinds of devices. It's interesting to see some of the economics and efficiencies of sensors, for example, being put into animals like cows to help monitor their health and feeding. A lot of efficiencies in having healthier herds, in less daily care because they can kind of monitor it that way, on and on. One thing on the efficiency side, when I was at the President's Commission, we went to a natural gas compressor station. This is one of the biggest ones in the country. Compresses the gas, pushes it in the pipeline. They had 25 to 30 people around the clock. After they put in their control system, their supervisory control and data acquisition system that automated the flows and controlled it, they went to 4 to 6 people part-time. There are huge efficiencies, so don't get me wrong. There's huge efficiencies. We should embrace it. We just need to be careful to just not turn everything on if we don't need it. And we need to be mindful of cybersecurity. I mean, it's this simple. Touching a key on a computer can impact a device like this this equipment here on the right. Whether that's something in manufacturing, energy, transportation, all can be impacted through cyber, which can be good and bad. About 2 years ago, you probably remember hearing on the news about SolarWinds, and this was a hack, a vulnerability that was exploited that impacted the government, the private sector, and obviously this company itself that was hacked. You can see their stock price just dropped dramatically. And this was a tool to kind of help manage networks, and got turned around. These zero-day exploits or new vulnerabilities happen. So that was 2 years ago. Just recently, we saw a case where the operating system in the BlackBerry phones that we know about, which are still around, their operating system is called QNX. And there was a vulnerability discovered. You say, well, there probably aren't that many phones around, not a big deal. Well, that operating system is in millions of transportation vehicles, automobiles, especially in trucks, manufacturing, and in medical devices. So fortunately, this was found and patched. In fact, this was a great case where INL was working with the Department of Homeland Security, working with BlackBerry, and got this patch before there was significant exploits of it. So this, we talk about convenience, efficiency, risk, vulnerabilities, threat, and I like to talk about risk because it all comes down to risk and how much risk we want to take as a nation. I want to start with just the different kinds of risks. One is called sensational risk, and that's where we tend to overreact. So a good example of that is the picture on the right is of a rattlesnake that was caught in Home Depot. This goes back a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if any of you remember it on the news or not, but I hate rattlesnakes. I hate snakes. So I found myself in Home Depot a day or two after that, and I'm looking around for snakes. There was a snake in one. Obviously, that's got to be an event of like what, 1 in a billion or some very statistically insignificant amount. My bigger risk should have been on someone hitting me with a shopping cart and paying attention, but that's an example of sensational risk and how it can get us thinking not logically at times. We also have a natural risk versus human-made risk, and we're much more willing to assume natural risk versus human-made risk. Good example of that is radiation. We're less worried about radiation from the sun. We're a lot more worried about radiation exposure from nuclear power, as an example. Here's where it gets interesting. When we study uncertainty risk, and there's been some good analysis of this at Harvard, and these patterns are ingrained. these behaviors. It's kind of part of our survival instinct. But when we have uncertainty of something happening, we're much more afraid of those risks when uncertainty is high. And as we get educated, it does better. But what this means is cyber, which is an area where uncertainty is high, it keeps changing. A lot of people don't know what to do, and so they tend to ignore it or not give it enough attention. I'd like to do an example that's hard to do virtually, but I'll just kind of let you think about this. Is if we played a game where I had a $100 bill and said, if we flip a coin, heads you get it, tails you don't, that's kind of a no-brainer to do. But if I said, look, I want to understand your risk, so I'm going to give you a choice. You can either take $25. This is kind of like the game show Let's Make a Deal, if you remember that. If you can take $25 and walk away, or you can flip a coin, and if you win, you get $100. If you lose, you get nothing. You can select you can take $50 or flip a coin, $75 or flip a coin. What's interesting is if we took a survey, is we would all have we'd have people in each category. In fact, what's interesting is I find that college students that have the least amount of money will basically are willing to take the biggest risk, meaning they want the 100. They're prepared to take 100 or 0. A lot of people are like, you know what? I hadn't planned on getting any money. If I can get $50, that's kind of in the middle. Then some people take 25, 75. There's no right or wrong answer. Think about what you would take. And if you're on the lower end, like myself, you're more conservative when it comes to risk. And if you're willing to take 75 or you wouldn't take anything, you'd flip the coin, you just have a higher risk tolerance. What becomes tricky is how we take our individual risk tolerance levels and apply them at a national level to make decisions about risk. A good example is wearing masks, getting vaccinated. Everyone, I'm not here to say there's a right or wrong answer. Some people have zero tolerance and basically live in the bubble. I think of the John Travolta movie Bubble Boy. He had an immune disorder and lived in the bubble. And then the other extreme is no lifestyle changes and people in between. It's just a good example of risk tolerance. I have some people say, Ron, I'm worried about this cyber threat. I'm going to disconnect everything. I had a doctor tell me he was thinking about going back to manual records. There's a lot of value of using IT technology. Just got to do it safely. We recognize that cooking is very important to our society. It is the leading cause of house fires, but I think most of us on this call, everyone on this call, has a range, an oven, and there are basic safety measures that we take. We don't leave food unattended, keep it free from things that could catch fire, blah blah blah. We're taught about these basic safety measures. Well, I'd like to say it's the same thing. It's the same thing. There's some basic cyber hygiene that we should be doing. You don't leave your devices unattended. You should, obviously you should lock your phone. There's things like this that can go a long way in creating problems. So risk management is understanding the vulnerabilities, threats, and consequences to these man-made threats. And I would venture that most of us have had some experience with some kind of real-life cybersecurity incident. I'll give you two quick examples. One is I bought a very cheap Chinese security camera several years ago. Went away over the holidays, had my camera up, and I got an email on Christmas Day that I had incurred $100 usage charge. And what was I doing with all this usage? Well, basically, a hacker sent out a threat, an attack on everyone who had this device. And the company, and it turned on everyone's video and broadcast it around the world. I wasn't, fortunately I was at home. There's nothing to broadcast. The company that owned it put out a firmware update within a week after, not acknowledging there was ever an issue. And so it's a reminder that we need to use devices that are secure. I use a different brand, a name brand of security devices at home. And one of the things that attracted me to them is they're regularly running updates. So it's not like I've given away the device. I don't use the technology. I just want to use more secure technology. You'll pay more for it, but you have the security benefit. If you have a national security clearance like me, you could be one of the people that had their identity stolen, and I've had that come back to me. I've got credit monitoring and identity monitoring because I've had people try to set up bank accounts, utility accounts. It can happen to anyone, and will. I mean, these things, unfortunately, this is the environment that we live in. So let me change tunes. I talked about interdependencies and how important they are and how they're increasing. I want to just provide a simple definition. When we talk about infrastructure dependencies, we're talking about the reliance of one infrastructure on another. So electric power is tied to natural gas. Natural gas is used in electric power generating plants, and it's a key part. Water is used for cooling, and we call that a one-way relationship. But we can also look at what we call interdependencies, which is a bidirectional flow. So going back to our natural gas example, we can see that the fuel, natural gas is used as fuel in the generation, but electricity is used as power for the compressor, storage, control, etc. What's interesting is I'm starting just to build out here first level infrastructure and dependencies. It gets very busy, and we don't even understand all of the interdependencies at a second, third, fourth, fifth level. But we're becoming more and more interconnected. When I look back on my work at the President's Commission in the 90s, when I studied the natural gas infrastructure, that was one of my infrastructures. Back in the 60s, 70s, even in the 80s, they could rely without power. They could rely without telecommunications. They had pneumatic devices. They didn't have these control systems. So they weren't reliant. They could operate, but obviously it wasn't efficient. But it just kind of shows that we need everything running to have these one-way and these bidirectional dependencies, interdependencies working for us. Here's an example of different types of interdependencies. We have the physical interdependency. In this case, this is transportation and electric power. The transportation is providing the physical coal, and the electricity is controlling the physical switches on the rail. So we call that a physical linkage. The cyber linkage is, like I showed before, touching a button on a computer, operating equipment remotely. You might hear that as SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition system, is another way of how we categorize that control. Here's where it's interesting, and this is a really, both cyber's growing, but also what we'd call our geographic interdependency or common corridor. More and more we see different utilities in the same right-of-way. So if there's a problem in that right-of-way, it can affect multiple infrastructures. There was a terrible fire in a Baltimore tunnel several years ago, and that affected telecommunications, affected electric power, natural gas, wastewater, because they were all in this same right-of-way. And part of the reason of the growth back in 20 years ago, it was a simple, hey, not in my backyard, was the public sentiment that no one wanted. Hey, I don't want that transmission power tower, that transmission tower in my backyard, in my subdivision. And then I would say 10 years ago, public sentiment got even worse, and the acronym BANANA came up. build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. Hey, don't even think about building something near me. And last year or two, I've seen this acronym called CAVE, which is Citizens Against Virtually Everything. Don't even try to get infrastructure projects started. So it just kind of shows why we have more challenges with common corridor issues. I like this graphic. I talked about the complexity of interdependencies, and I'd like to just read this real quick. A short in an antiquated transmission tower blew a hole in an aging pipeline, spewing crude on worn-out tracks, sending a dated commuter train into a failing bridge, which crashed into an obsolete natural gas line that exploded, consuming an entire neighborhood in a raging inferno until an old leaky water main swallowed the whole thing in a sinkhole. I mean, it's a crazy scenario here, but the reality is each of these events we've seen happen in the last 6 to 12 months. Not all together, but some combination of these have and will continue. And it just kind of highlights how complex the problem can be. One of the growing areas of interdependencies is, we rely on our information technology, but we're also now relying more and more on our telecommunications sector. We need data. We become data hogs, so to speak, and we need the bandwidth to move that data around. Here's an example. I got some traffic from a internet service provider here in Idaho, and this top graphic is a individual user. This is a gamer in the city, in a small city in Idaho. He basically has a 20 megabit connection or pipe from his internet service provider. Basically, he upset another gamer who sent a denial of service attack, said, okay, about a year out of the game, and you can see his pipe just got clogged. He was not able to connect because his whole bandwidth was taken up with this denial of service attack. At the same time, that cascaded to the whole city that had a gigabit pipe, but that gigabit pipe was quickly closed because of this denial of service attack. I don't know if you recall hearing of the Dyn attack. There was that was a denial of service attack on a big chunk of the internet. We've seen other ones that attack servers. You'll see Twitter, Facebook, other places can go down at different times because of attacks on their servers. So let me turn briefly to INL, some of the things that we're doing in critical infrastructure and in resilience. We have test ranges for power, for wireless. We're heavily involved in cybersecurity, especially on the control system side, and on the IT and OT merger. There's a lot of good research being done in cybersecurity, and so we're very careful to say, look, as INL or National Lab, we're here to do things that other can't, won't, or shouldn't do. So we do more of the research of what's happening in the future when it comes to cyber. I mentioned dependencies, interdependencies. They have a big impact on continuity of government, continuity of operations, and so we help infrastructure owners in the government. I mentioned our test ranges. We have an 890 square mile range. We've had 52 nuclear reactors built, and that's given us a platform to take some of that infrastructure and be able to use it to do testing. So, for example, electric power utility companies that don't want to try things on their system and take users down can come to INL and do that. 5G offers a lot of opportunities, but also challenges. So we're working on security issues with that, as well as trying to get out in front of what 6G is going to be and how to embed security better in that. Our largest cybersecurity program is with DHS, the Cybersecurity Division. With that, we do things like threat hunting, vulnerability management, education. Below is one of our research laboratories called CELR, Controls Environment Laboratory Resource. what we do is we have physical and virtual representations of critical infrastructure. In this case, this is the electric distribution. It has real controls in it. We can swap out different components, and we can test to see if vulnerabilities are real or not, how to mitigate them. We can let owners and operators, academia, we support events like DEF CON where people can connect to our skids, we call them skids, and can see those how they operate and learn more how to defend them. We have online training that we support with DHS. A lot of it is free. There's some basic training. If you Google DHS cybersecurity training, you'll see links to online classes. We also have during non-COVID times, we have physical training available that's also free, mostly to for owners and operators of critical infrastructure around the globe. They come for a week. The highlight of this is there's a red-blue team. Red attacks, blue team has to defend a real control system and all the IT systems with Go. So it really simulates what can happen in the real world, and they're trained on how to protect these systems in advance and then apply that with our folks being in the middle and navigating them through that exercise. So companies that ask for help, hey, we've been attacked, if they come to DHS, we'll deploy teams or we'll provide remote support, and companies can ask for assessment help through DHS as well. We also support at DHS the National Risk Management Center. They're challenged with answering that risk question. What are the risks? Where should we be investing money? How do we mitigate it? Because there's so many assets, infrastructure, we're very heavily geared around visualization, especially around geographic information systems or GIS. And so you see examples of graphics here. This one, the bottom left, the band, the width of this band really shows the relationship of the dependency from one asset to another. So this could be a substation supporting a water plant and other infrastructure, and we lay that out. We have open source data that we use. We have a lot of DHS data, and map out the dependencies. We have what we call generic profiles of these dependencies that you can apply, and then as you get actual data, you can plug that in too. So this is also good to understand supply chain issues. The good example are the issues that we're seeing with COVID in a lot of the supplies that we need. Same concept here with supply chains. In fact, one of our flagship programs with DHS has been what's called RRAPS, Regional Resiliency Assessment Program. And these are where DHS works with a region and a sector on how to make them more resilient. And prior to COVID, right before COVID, a project was done on healthcare in New York City and surrounding area. And there were a lot of lessons learned that our analysts were able to help at the onset of COVID to help New York City. Remember, New York City got hit very hard early on. They were lacking supplies, and we had some insights that were able to help. So it's a good news story there. We actually have a tool, commercial routing assistance tool that we built during COVID to help with interstate trucking problems. So truckers understood some of the constraints, and it helped them provide optimal routes, building on the capabilities that we have here. This is here's a screenshot of the CRA tool. We work very closely with the All Hazards Consortium, and this is actually up for an R&D 100 award currently. And I think if you want more, you can Google it. Want to just turn for a moment. One of the things that we set up at INL is called the IROC, or the INL Resilience Optimization Center. We recognize that we had a lot of things going on in the resilience space on our nuclear side, our energy environment, national homeland security. How do we better integrate that together and how do we partner outside of INL. So we set this up about 2 years ago to better collaborate with programs, partners, facility staff. You can see some of the capabilities, things that I've mentioned as far as wireless, power, risk assessments, modeling and simulation, cybersecurity, our facilities, and what we've developed and continue to develop here is this premier cyber physical test range. That being able to go from pure modeling and simulation to virtualization to a small scale to our full scale test ranges, and being able to identify the seams of what you can handle in a modeling and simulation, and when it grows to the next level, a small scale. A good example of this is the Aurora test. This goes back to 2007. At the time, there was a lack of understanding in the community that cyber could cause physical impacts. And so Aurora, they modeled it, proved it out, and they said, okay, show us a small scale. Did that, and then they did a full scale test on a generator that actually, got it to shake, smoke, to work all the way through that. Not everything needs to go to full scale testing. It could become expensive, but here's a way to be able to navigate where you need to be in the research environment. So we're continuing to evolve our research environment, and we encourage people, external entities, to partner with us. We have a website, resilience.inl.gov. You can Google INL ROC. There's a video on YouTube that I won't take time to show today, but and there's contacts on who to follow up with. I'd like to quickly turn to some personal research around resilience that I've been involved with. One is cybersecurity it's hard to know what the risks are. And so I wanted to know, from working with the Security Exchange Commissions, I went to them and said, I'm interested in learning more about what public companies are saying in their 10K filing. So when a company files an annual report, that's their glossy report. They can say whatever they want in it. But a 10K filing is an official report with the SEC, and they have to acknowledge what their business risks are. And so I wanted to know who's calling out cyber risk as a risk to their business. Bottom line is less than 3% of public companies report it, despite SEC encouraging people to disclose their cyber risk. So there's a lot more to do here, and working with DHS and the SEC on what that looks like in the future. Having been in this space for many years, I was curious, as well as colleague Mary Klett at INL and Mike Norman at DHS, on, are we getting better? We're telling industry about these vulnerabilities and threats. How prepared is industry? Because if you look at our critical infrastructure, 85-90% of the infrastructure is owned by the private sector. So we had access to 5,000 vulnerability surveys that were done, assessments that were done at critical infrastructure sites by DHS Protective Security Advisors working with owners and operators. And what we discovered is only 5% of these sites, these organizations, have a business continuity plan, a physical security plan, and a cyber security plan. So they had to have all three of those plans. They had to just provide some basic training on those plans to their staff, and they had to exercise them once a year. So that was kind of our 5 criteria. You had to have 3 plans, you had to exercise them, and you had to train on them. Only 5% meet that criteria. So that taught us there's a lot of low-hanging fruit to work with industry to help them be better prepared, because there's not a big cost for doing those things. It's not like we're saying, hey, you've got to spend millions on gates, guards, guns, physical security measures. This is some of the first level things that organizations should be doing. Going back to risk, some organizations just don't understand the risk, or they're confused on what it really is, and so they ignore it. So that helped to kind of figure out what next steps are. The last study I want to talk about, just to give you a flavor of cybersecurity and resilience, is the human side is huge. If we have a culture of security, cybersecurity, physical security, that's going to go a long ways to our families, us individually, our organizations, and communities and nations. And one of the things that we looked at is we took a group of subject matter experts at INL that had worked with industry and said, hey, what are some of the attributes that you're seeing that make organizations better when it comes to cybersecurity? And having top managers promote it and lead by example really help build a culture of cybersecurity awareness. One thing I'll add to this, going back to the other study of with organizations not being prepared, is we found out, we went back 180 days to organizations that had assessments and found that most of them were very proactive and statistically made significant investments. So it showed that when organizations have enough information to make risk-informed decisions, they'll spend money. So that was very eye-opening to learn. I talked early on about the holistic resilience. I'm winding down here. One aspect we're working on right now is on the personal resilience side. Think about your situation, about financial resilience, emergency preparedness, public health. And one of the things we're attempting to do is go back to my experience of being hacked and think about others and yourself, is providing a tool that would help people quickly assess where they're at on basically a dashboard and how they can become more resilient in a certain area if they want. So I have a capstone team at University of Utah working on helping us take these questions and analysis and put it into an app or website. And this will just be out there in the public domain to kind of see if there's enough interest for tools like this for people to learn how to be more resilient. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of great information out there. By the way, FEMA has a lot of great stuff, but it becomes very confusing, time consuming. Can we kind of put it in an app, let people take a couple minutes, assess where they're at, and then get better if they want? So stay tuned, more to come. So in summary, resilience challenges have become way more complex. We see natural disasters increasing. Our cyber dependency, our telecommunications dependencies, our bi-directional dependencies from one lifeline infrastructure to the other, they're all continuing to increase and be more complex. So we need to address this and tackle it as a holistic team and multidisciplinary teams. We need computer scientists, cybersecurity folks, infrastructure analysts with specialty in infrastructures, policymakers, all kind of working together on this. And it needs to be a public-private partnership. We can only be successful in INL unless we have the correct partners. That's why we've set up IROC to better partner in that space. With that, I will stop, and hopefully I left some time for questions. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great day. My contact information is there. Feel free to reach out to me, ron.fisher@inl.gov. Thank you.